Hi, my name's Xanthe, and I'm one of the ADHD coaches, ADHD advocate. It's really exciting to be part of this space with you today, looking at opportunities to really connect to the ADHD Awareness Month and the Empowerment Month at ADHD Advocate. Today, we're going to spend a bit of time talking around the relationship between the menopause and ADHD. And I'm really hoping that there's something in this that will connect with you and be helpful. When I was thinking about this webinar and my own relationship with the ADHD and menopause kind of journey, I thought back to my childhood, and I don't really remember many conversations about the menopause sort of happening in front of me as a child. The menopause was something that women just managed or quietly struggled with. And I do remember jokes about hot flashes and grumpy women with little understanding and compassion. A bit like when we hear sort of, people sort of laughing and joking about women who are premenstrual or struggling with their hormones. And alongside this, I don't really remember any conversations about girls with ADHD. In fact, I couldn't think of one conversation that I was part of as a child or in early adolescence or early adulthood. ADHD was something naughty boys had, something that you didn't want, something that was stigmatized, and definitely something to be cautious of. And if I'm honest, I probably wouldn't have gone out with a boy if I'd have known they had ADHD at age 16, which I feel really ashamed of saying. Now I'm sort of embracing and loving ADHD life. So what happens as a woman when you're handed over both the menopause and ADHD in adulthood? And what happens when you realise you can't hand any of them back? When the branding of both of these things has not been positive in your childhood and early sort of teenage adult years. I was diagnosed with ADHD in my 40s, about the time of the perimenopause for me, and when my hormones started to play tricks on me. As a child and as an adult, I always felt like I was colouring outside of the lines. I always felt different. And I knew that I found certain aspects of just being human tough. I'd find it difficult to concentrate and get distracted easily. School wasn't always an easy ride for me, particularly senior school as a consequence of this. I'd miss so much of what was being said, and things like away with the fairies and have you got your listening head on, sort of wormage, words or gubbage style, were terms I sort of often heard as a child. I was also what some people would describe as an overthinker. My brain felt like it was living its life like a bus to catch. On the days where I did make it to the bus in my brain, I often realised I was on the wrong bus. Or when the right bus was caught, I realised I'd missed so much in the rushing in my brain, in hyper focus mode. And overall, there were times when my brain felt quite overwhelmed and exhausted. But I think despite this, I managed to dust myself down, had good support with me in terms of my mum, found some hacks to anchor the annoying parts of ADHD without realizing it was ADHD at the time, and generally learned to style ADHD out or mask it, as we often talk about. Not always successfully, I might add, but that's another story. But then came the perimenopause, and the styling out wasn't working anymore. I guess my brain went from feeling weird and different to ridiculous, and at times I would say completely unreliable. Brain fog, sleep disturbances, forgetfulness, loss of motivation, sort of like my ADHD symptoms had been supercharged. This experience isn't untypical, and many women are getting diagnosed in later life, potentially because of this. Attitude has recently done a survey where they asked 1,500 women with undiagnosed and diagnosed ADHD if menopause exacerbated the symptoms of ADHD, and a staggering but maybe not surprising 94% of women said the menopause exacerbated the symptoms of ADHD. There is limited research available in relation to the menopause and ADHD, but there is plenty of what Attitude would say anecdotal evidence that highlights the relationship between the two. Many women I've met through coaching and in the ADHD community share stories of how the menopause almost unraveled, I would say, their ADHD, and how their ADHD symptoms absolutely kind of worsened for them, despite them also maybe having many years of kind of masking or managing. So why does this happen? What we do know about the menopause is that estrogen levels decline and fluctuate. And what we do know about estrogen is that it influences and plays a really important part in executive functioning, which we talk a lot about in the ADHD community. It also influences mood and attention. So I guess it does make sense that if you've got a brain that is already working harder in these areas, that the menopause is going to make that working harder even harder. So what can we do about ADHD in the menopause and this weird relationship that unfolds before us in our later kind of years and in our 40s potentially? And what can we do if it feels like our ADHD and the menopause are having like a bun fight in our brains? How do we take care of them both? This one sounds really simple, but harder to do, I think, when you're tempted to hide from the world and yourself during the menopause. But reach out and ask for support from a medical practitioner, a GP, maybe, alongside speaking to family and friends. There can be a lot of shame that comes along with ADHD and the menopause, I think. And there's a researcher who I really love her work called Brené Brown. She describes in her book, The Gift of Imperfection, the relationship between shame and secrecy and how shame loves secrecy. But if we make our vulnerabilities less secret, then we expose the unhelpfulness of shame and move towards getting the help we need, whether that's a diagnosis of ADHD or help with our menopause, or actually both of these things. If we don't get the response we need and deserve from the people that we reach out to the first time, go back and seek out alternative support, but know that there is amazing help, understanding and support out there. I think it's important to note maybe that some of us have really strong relationships with people pleasing and rejection sensitivity alongside our ADHD. So a doctor or someone we know dismissing our experiences of ADHD in the menopause may only exacerbate the symptoms, leading to all sorts of difficulties. So persevere as much as everything about your being may not want to. The other thing I think that feels quite important to talk about, which often comes up in coaching, is trying to find the compassion that we have in ourselves. So many ADHD people are so compassionate towards others, but find it really difficult to find that compassion when thinking about themselves. Self-compassion may help us to be kinder to ourselves when facing challenges, reducing feelings of shame or frustration. Compassion towards ourselves can often quieten down also the inner critic, which can be really heavily influenced by ADHD in the menopause. I'm not good enough, I'm rubbish, I'm different, all of those sorts of things. If we do this, then we may find the space we deserve to connect to our strengths, which may feel at times like digging for gold. The menopause and ADHD are very skilled at encouraging us to look for the negative. I guess sort of what I'm saying, potentially in quite a clumsy way, is just don't let any of them get away with that. This one sounds obvious, but I'm going to mention it anyway, because it comes up in all the stuff you read about the menopause and ADHD. But exercise can be incredibly beneficial for individuals with ADHD in the menopause. Regular exercise, we know, helps improve focus, reduces impulsivity, and it helps us manage the symptoms by boosting the production of neurotransmitters like dopamine, which again we often talk about when we're thinking about ADHD. And this plays a really key role in attention and mood regulation. So I guess get moving in whichever way brings you joy, and that will look different depending on what exercise you enjoy. The other thing that feels quite important is sleep and shut-eye. Easier said than done with ADHD and the menopause, but sleeping difficulties we know can go hand in hand with both. Finding ways to take care of our sleep is essential for managing symptoms for both of these things, maintaining mental and physical health, and just enhancing overall quality of life. I always talk about kind of sleep is the gift that keeps on giving, I think, for ADHD. If everything in the world just seems more rubbish and more difficult, if we're tired and our body and our minds haven't got the energy to face into things, implementing healthy sleep practices can really help navigate this transitional period potentially more smoothly. And if sleep persists to be a problem, like it often can, it often has a mind of its own, seeking professional help and reaching out in the way that we just talked about earlier may also be helpful in terms of finding solutions. The other thing that always comes up when researching ADHD and the menopause and what we can do about it is our diet, and I guess what we eat. diet plays a crucial role in managing menopausal and ADHD symptoms, and generally sort of promoting overall health. And I guess, it's about us taking the time to understand what our ADHD and our menopause may need from us in terms of nutrition. And there's lots of information available out there. And doing this in a way that feels realistic for us. It's no point kind of setting unrealistic goals that we don't kind of meet, because I think that will just exacerbate our feelings of not being good enough. So within all of these things, it's about being realistic, I think, and being sort of kind to ourselves and find out what's important to us. But I think, most importantly, when I was thinking about this, amongst all of the top tips that are out there and readily available in Google searches, is really taking the time to understand what the ADHD experience and the menopause experience means to us and what it means to you. And it's about taking the time, I think, that we don't do enough of, to remind ourselves about what is possible, and what can be achieved, and who we are with ADHD and the menopause, and leaning into that version of ourselves authentically. And again, sort of Brené Brown, she writes a lovely quote. I'm going to try and find it if I can. Put it somewhere. Let me try and find it. Here it is. About the relationship with authenticity. I think this really jumped out at me when I was thinking about the menopause and ADHD. But what she says is, authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. Choosing authenticity means cultivating the courage to be imperfect, to set boundaries, and to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Exercising the compassion that comes from knowing that we are all made of strength and struggle, and nurturing the connection and sense of belonging that can only happen when we believe that we are enough. Authenticity demands wholehearted living and loving, even when it's hard, even when we're wrestling with the shame and fear of not being good enough, and especially when the joy is so intense that we're afraid to let ourselves feel it. Mindfully practicing authenticity during our most soul-searching struggles is how we invite grace, joy, and gratitude into our lives. And I felt like this was a really lovely quote that could hopefully travel with us when thinking about our relationship with the ADHD and menopause. I'd like to invite other people to kind of write their experiences of navigating ADHD and menopause. If anyone's got any wonderful ideas about what's helped them, it would be amazing to have some of those comments in the chat. My ADHD menopause has looked quite peculiar at times. It's involved roller skating and taking up new hobbies and ice baths, and generally learning who I am with both of those things. But there are so many possibilities to both of those experiences, and I hope you find the opportunity to lean into those. Thank you.